Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm Joe Devine, and I'm joined now by Alex Stewart. Hello, Alex.
Hey, Joe.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm great.
That's good news. Fine. Also, guten Tag, Herr Stafford Bloor. Wie geht's du?
Guten Tag, Herr Devine. Mir geht's is good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Had a lovely weekend of football watching, including AFCON, the start of AFCON, African Cup of Nations, which we will be talking a little bit about today, including Cameroon and Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Cape Verde. Very exciting stuff. Also today, we will be talking about some of the Bundesliga. I watched Eintracht Frankfurt, Borussia Dortmund over the weekend. That was a fun game. Leipzig played Mainz 2. Bayern lost on the Friday. We don't touch on that. Bit interesting stuff. And one Dijon to Italy, so that Seb can moan again about Mourinho. It never gets old, Seb. Never.
No, fresh as a daisy.
Yes, there we go. FA Cup third round replay also happened this weekend. But I don't think anybody watched any of that, so we're probably not going to talk about that. But there are some transfer things that have occurred. Philippe Coutinho to Aston Villa, Luca Digne to Aston Villa, other good players, I'm sure, will have moved to Aston Villa by the end of the day as well. So, there'll be loads to discuss there, which we pick up towards the end of the podcast. And if you want to keep on top of all things that are good and good for you, you should visit The Athletic. theathletic.com/Tifo. One of the greatest places in the world to get facts and get them in a fun way about things you like. The Athletic, theathletic.com/Tifo. It really is worthwhile. 30-day free trial as well. So if you don't like it, just cancel it. It's fine. Yeah? You won't want to do that, though, because it's very good. There we go. Now, for today's episode, I will leave you in the warm hands and the oh-so-cool embrace of the African Cup of Nations. Let's begin with AFCON, African Cup of Nations, hosted in Cameroon this year. Very exciting. Technically called AFCON 2021 for the same reasons that the Euros were Euros 2020. A scar of the pandemic there, of course. But it's happening. It's fun. I enjoyed watching the opening game, Seb. Cameroon 2, 1 Burkina Faso. Strange game. Bit of a strange game. Lots of interesting moments. But mainly I felt like, I don't know, maybe we'll come back and talk to Alex about the tactical setup from Cameroon later, which in the first half didn't appear to work at all. Maybe Alex will have a different opinion. But in terms of action-packed.
Yeah, so I had a little bit of a technical glitch. So I was actually watching on a delay with you throwing spoilers at me.
Sure.
And one of them was the reveal about the tackle a minute into the tournament, which is... So older viewers will remember some of the tackling from the first game of Italia 90. This was better. This was a kind of welcome to the tournament moment. I can't believe that survived the red card.
It was Yago was the Burkina Faso defender, correct?
It was a real no nonsense tackle. It was a kind of It was the thing was I was the standard was good. I think it was a classic first game of the tournament in the sense that there was just a little bit too much adrenaline everywhere. And I think also, I don't know what Alex thinks about this, but I felt a little bit like Cameroon, not buckled under the pressure because they still won the game. They're a little bit inhibited by the pressure of hosting the tournament. And that showed in a few moments, especially in the second half, because they had a few chances to kill off the game to make it 3-1, and it felt as if some of the decision making deteriorated a little bit. But I enjoyed it. It was I could have just watched the first half injury time and still enjoyed it. It was that was, I think one of the better moments of the game was the tackle which led to the second penalty. And it's as clear a penalty as you can see.
Yeah.
The referee awards it quite rightly, good decision, and there were very, very few complaints from any of the Burkina Faso players, but the player that gave away the penalty just looked at the ref with with just incredulity. What?
No, that was good. I quite enjoyed the fouls in that game. A couple of other things I enjoyed from that game before we get to the tactics. There were technical difficulties. I don't know if your feed had this, if you had this in Germany, but there were technical difficulties which resulted in the scoreboard sort of disappearing for most of the match. Like the overlay graphics weren't appearing. But also during that time, it was a little bit inconsistent, but at times there was no transitional animation between replays and live game. And it really struck me how subtle, but how important that is, just to orient me as to which time I'm in right now. When there's a hard cut from a replay back to present time, I'd lose all orientation. I thought that was very interesting.
Do you remember when you used to watch like old time football, and when we were kind of at the vanguard of the dawn of the replay era, like replays just used to have in the top left hand corner the word replay,
but it
flashing.
flashed. Yeah.
And so there was a kind of a time before you needed clever transitions, but I never really considered it from that perspective. But
it's vitally important psychologically, I think, for the TV viewer. And it's funny how it's extremely subtle, something that you would not notice at all until it was gone. But there were lots of fun moments in this game. And something I wanted to ask you, Alex, about was a Cameroon setup, because ahead of the game, there was only 5 minutes of sort of pre-match roll on TV here before the game began, but the broadcasters had, I think it was Cameroon, as a 2-4-4, which wasn't correct, I know, but was the commentator who was discussing it seemed a little bit bewildered and surprised, but there we go. Also had Burkina Faso as a sort of strange formation as well. Cameroon were doing something I couldn't quite work out, and none of the formations I looked at online that they had them playing appeared to be what they were actually playing. It sort of changed rather fluidly throughout the game, didn't it? But interesting.
Yeah, so the basic premise, I think, in terms of how it was laid out, and certainly with the couple of apps that I checked, showed that Cameroon were using a 3 at the back system with wing backs and 2 up front. And to be fair, with Cameroon, they have used both a 3 and a 4 during World Cup qualifying, so that was entirely plausible. What was interesting, though, was that their ostensible left wing back, who was wearing number 3, was Nkunku, was actually playing as like an inverted right-sided midfielder, as if he were like on the right-hand side of a central midfield diamond, kind of. But then Akambe was playing as one of the 2 strikers, but was drifting very, very wide left. And Gueye was dropping off between the centre-backs rather than Anguissa. Basically, it was one of those things where the information that you're provided at the beginning of a game as some sort of guide was completely off. And I don't know whether that was because Conceição had submitted a slightly, I don't want to say dodgy team sheet, but something that would make Burkina Faso were lined up as a fairly orthodox 4-2-3-1. And they would have thought, oh, okay, well, we can match in these wide areas and blah, blah, blah. This is what's going to happen. And then, of course, Cameroon really changed it. Their fullbacks kind of inverted slightly. They tucked in a little bit and formed like a 2-5-3. But it was Nkunku who had this kind of really weird free role that you would not expect from somebody who actually ordinarily plays as a left wing back or a left midfielder as well. And I think that was their kind of effort to be surprising and disruptive for what Burkina Faso would have prepared for.
Yeah.
And at times it worked. At times it was really good, and they were able to get that kind of 2-3-5 system with lots of rotation and reorientation in the front line of that attacking bit. And the goal that I think was disallowed for offside came from Nkunku making this really good run into the box and shooting. But yeah, there were a lot of times where it seemed slightly disjointed as well.
It certainly had the feel of an opening tournament game with some nerves. It was quite chaotic at times, wasn't it? And you could see that the plans were there, but they just for half of the game at least, it didn't really seem to work. What interested me was Burkina Faso. Of course, they weren't coming into the game as favourites. I'm fairly certain Cameroon would have been considered favourites within this game, but Burkina Faso would be what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say
they were an outsider for this game.
They're an outsider for the game, but for the tournament as a whole, they're not exactly an outsider. I think they'll be expected to qualify from the group, probably. They could go some way. So it's not an easy first game for Cameroon. Burkina Faso, they seemed to hold the team, seemed to hold Cameroon very well. They just didn't create very much, did they? They scored their goal from what seemed like their first opportunity, although there were 2 exactly just before that. And one thing I wanted to pick up on before we move on was Anana's goalkeeping, which for most of the game was very good and actually improved as the game went on. But there was the moment for the Burkina Faso goal where a cross has just he's misread a cross coming in, it swerved past him, almost hit the crossbar. And when the cross for the goal comes back in, which is immediately after that, you have this sort of feeling watching him that he's decided to come for that ball, regardless of whether he can get it or not. A fantastic finish, so not to say that it wouldn't have been a goal anyway, but it was one of those moments you see in goalkeeping sometimes where you're essentially watching someone decide to take control of a situation before they have any real information, which is a real sign of confidence. And it's something I'm sure goalkeepers have to do and will sometimes get wrong, but can be quite amusing to watch.
See, I remember you texting me this, and it's a really good point because it's like, obviously Andre Onana hasn't played a lot of football recently. He's just served out his ban.
For listeners who don't know, will you just go over that as well, because that'd be useful?
Yeah, so he accidentally took a pill. He took some medication that was actually prescribed to his wife. I think it might have been a pregnancy pill of some kind. He was trying to take, his version of events is he was trying to take a paracetamol, and he took a pill which looked very much like a paracetamol. And we should say that explanation has been accepted, but he served out a ban anyway because the thing that he took was on the banned substance list.
That's weird. Is there just no flexibility there with CAS, or if they accept the reason being an accident, there's no flexibility for it? Because the ban was 9 months long, shortened from a year.
Yeah, so I think it got down to 9 months as a result of them accepting his explanation. But I suppose, and I say this without really understanding doping regulations at all, but I suppose regardless of what your explanation is, you have still taken a banned substance and it's still in your body. And so theoretically, you gain some kind of advantage from that. I don't know if that's the case, but that would be me following the logic through. But so your point about goalkeeping, I played in goal when I was at school. If you have a bad touch, there's this weird impulse that you have to then kind of correct your equilibrium by having a really good touch. And
particularly if you don't touch the ball very often. And in this game, Onana was certainly the less busy of the two goalkeepers.
Well, also, can you imagine being Andre Onana? So you've sat out the last year of your career. You haven't played really any club football. And then you come into a tournament that your country's hosting as a key player for your country, because if they're going to win the tournament, Andre Onana is going to have a very, very good tournament. And so, can you imagine the nerves and the expectation and the pressure? And you have a moment like that, and the cross that the cross that nearly went in, the first cross that nearly went in that came back off the bar, I think that was a worse sort of aesthetic than what eventually happened. So I have some sympathy for him, and he kind of recovered. He had a pretty decent game afterwards, and he is a very, very good goalkeeper. So I'm sure it was just a kind of a first night nerve situation, a bit of rustiness perhaps.
I think it's tricky as well though for that second cross where obviously he gets kind of basically body blocked off by the attacker that's coming in to challenge him. Burkina Faso did have two guys over at the far post, and there was only one defender from Cameroon there. So although I think you're right about that commitment to that decision ahead of time to rectify the previous error, it is also probably one he should have gone for anyway.
I think
because of the fact
the stars align. Psychologically and practically it made sense. It just didn't work.
To me, a little bit, yes, I think so.
I think it's one of those things that goes, if you, like with goalkeeping, so in that situation, you're making the decision to come for a ball or not come for a ball within split seconds of the crosser releasing the cross. And one of the things that goes, I suppose, it's a little bit like not being able to chip and putt. If you don't play golf very often, it's the same kind of thing that sort of discussed in that sport. If you're not playing, if you have no familiarity, you lose all of these little instinctive abilities which kind of underpin your game and which kind of provide that basic level of security. And that was that. I think the first one is that. I think the second one is what Joe was describing as kind of, I need a commanding moment. I'm Andre Onana. I'm important. I'm the first choice goalkeeper in my country. Here am I. I'm coming for this ball. I'm going to take it. It feels a little bit like that. And I don't know. Like I'm not sure the kind of the blockers make that much difference. I think he should just come through that crowd anyway, and I think he would under normal circumstances.
I liked his distribution though. I thought some of
very much so.
He has
I love this throwing where he sort of two hands to push it out of the chest. The neck pass, is that what you call it?
No, netball pass.
Oh, I thought you called it the neck pass because he's passing it from his neck.
In netball, you're taught, generally speaking, to pass with that kind of like pulsing motion away from your chest.
Yeah.
And I also thought he has a very fluid overarm distribution as well. It's like a really nice movement. The ball doesn't get caught up in his hand. It's one smooth kind of bowling motion almost. And there are a couple of times when Cameroon could get good counterattacks away because he was very alive to that.
Right.
So I think that bodes well for him.
Sure. Absolutely. Well done, Cameroon. The other game, of course, they have. In fact, before we talk about the other game, I wanted to share a great resource which has been shared on Twitter. Friend of the podcast, Tiago Estevao, has collaborated with a couple of friends. Tiago is a football data scientist. His friends, Biff Mila and Ribeiro on Twitter. This document itself was shared by the account Free Wooley. I think that's how you say it. Free and then WULEI. We'll link to it in the podcast notes as well.
Espanol player like Wooley.
Wooley, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what's happening. But anyway, this person, Max, has put this on Twitter. It's a 2021 Africa Cup of Nations preview document. It's a very useful resource for anyone who's watching along, doesn't know loads about the players or wants to know more about the squads. I had the pleasure of talking to Thiago the other day and him tell me that it was quite difficult for the team to cover the tactical element of Sudan just because there's very, very limited footage available. So bless their hearts, they've done a fantastic job, and it's really it's very engaging watch-along material if you want to go and look at it.
There's also some good stuff on The Athletic with AFCON. Maher Mazahi is doing some coverage.
Yes.
He's a very, very good freelance African football journalist, and he's doing some stuff which is great.
I greatly enjoyed the big preview, all the stories. That helped me learn that Burkina Faso weren't a team that were supposed to go out of the groups, but weren't a team that was supposed to make it to the end. Now, if someone could teach me how to say that in a better way, that would be great. Maybe I'll go back and read more of The Athletic. The other game that happened, and we should stress, by the way, we're recording this on a Monday. It'll go out on a Tuesday. Senegal have played today. In fact, they played just after we finished recording. So I'm going to actually sit out and watch that game, I think. We won't talk about every game in depth as we go, because otherwise we'll end up just talking about the games that happen immediately before we speak. But it's the other opening day game was between Ethiopia 0-1 Cape Verde. And interestingly enough, thank you to everyone who sent me tweets and emails over the weekend responding to my request for you guys to tell me which team to follow. I decided I was going to follow Cape Verde. I didn't watch the game though, so I'm starting as I mean to go on. But I thought I was won over by the people who suggested that I follow Cape Verde, and I like the colour of their kit, so I've decided that'll be my team. Then they won the game. Seb, did you watch this one?
Yeah, I did, and it wasn't a great game, but there was one real moment of quality. Well, two. The second one we'll talk about in a minute. But I thought the Rodriguez cushioned volley to set up the Tavares goal was just brilliant. It was my favourite bit of skill from the two games. It's crossed to the back post, and it's that really difficult ball where you've got a defender coming across, you're on the run, and you're taking the ball out of midair, and he just cut it back perfectly, and it was nice. Tavares couldn't miss. There was one moment which was the free kick.
I was going to say that bit of skill which was beautiful. We did a video way back working with the Bundesliga on Kai Havertz, and there's a Havertz assist when he's at Leverkusen still, which is basically exactly the same, and it makes you realise how difficult that thing is. That kind of sticks in your mind as something you've seen before, because it just doesn't happen often.
No, it's a ball to the back post, which also, it's moving at quite a pace, and so to control it and not to just skew it off for a goal kick. But actually, this might have been relegated to second place. So Ethiopia had a man sent off. There was a really sort of wayward back header, which led to Tavares going through on goal and a centre-back committing a foul as the last man. Initially, the referee gave a yellow card, and Cape Verde lined up the free kick, which just as VAR intervened to tell the referee to come to the screen, Cape Verde player just put it in the top corner. It's absolutely wonderful free kick. I don't know if the TV cameras caught it. It didn't stand because the Cape Verde players went off celebrating, and the referee had already turned his back and was running to the VAR monitor. And then, I suppose the saving grace was that he then upgraded the yellow card to a red, quite rightly, because the Ethiopian defender was the last man.
Yeah.
And it was not a good decision to only give me yellow in the first place. But the tournament was denied what would have been the best goal of the first day, which was a real shame. And it was, and you could see the disappointment, not just the kind of we haven't taken the lead, but I've just scored an absolute banger in an international tournament. It's just been taken away. And it was also, it's like, I know the referee isn't watching, but it feels like it should have counted because every other player on the pitch was paying attention. Everybody thought the play was live. Goalkeeper tried to go for it. So by every measure, other than the referees, it was a goal. So real shame. But I suppose at least Cape Verde ended up winning and getting their goal in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just having a quick look at the Senegal lineup. This is the game I'm going to try to watch today.
Big old COVID outbreak in the Senegal.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that what's the name of the centre back who plays in Italy? Koulibaly. Is he down?
So
is he out with
Koulibaly and Mendy are both Edouard Mendy, the Chelsea keeper, are both out apparently.
That's a shame. Okay, still a fantastic team though. We've got Mane and Idrissa Gueye in here, and Koyate from Crystal Palace as well. This is a decent team, isn't it? Very good on paper.
Yeah, they're probably the favourites, aren't they, Senegal? So
Algeria also.
Yeah.
Who could say? Well, I'm sure we'll come back and discuss more AFCON next week. As I said, it won't be a sort of tactical, in-depth review of each game because we probably won't have the time to do that. But we'll pick our favourite moments from watching the tournament over the next week, and we will discuss that with you on Monday, if you are indeed going to watch along. But for now, we go to a break. Okay, that was a nice break. Eintracht Frankfurt 2, 3 Borussia Dortmund. Now, as I trailed at the beginning, Seb, I, for a change, decided to watch some Bundesliga this weekend. I picked this game, watched the first half, thought cracking Frankfurt display, 2-0. Couldn't see a way back for Dortmund, and then I went to have dinner with my partner and missed what sounded like a lot of fun.
You did, and I feel partly responsible because we were talking about Eintracht's performance in the first half, and you were like, Dortmund. You were surprised at how poor Dortmund were.
I thought they were rubbish.
No, this is kind of what they do, and you also said, why can't Erling Haaland just score like 5 goals?
I just wanted to see him do one of the big hit goals, fast hit goals.
So yeah, I don't know what that is, but yeah. A fast hit goal.
It's a new metric that's being
from
developed.
FBref, right?
Yeah.
But this is kind of who Dortmund are. So there's a lot of negativity in their fan base, and there's a lot of despondency, and particularly before games, they kind of ignore the fact that they're actually second in the Bundesliga and they win most of their matches. The problem for them, I think, just my opinion, is that they are a group of individuals. So if you think about what Dortmund used to be at their pinnacle under Jurgen Klopp and to a lesser extent Thomas Tuchel, they were a system team. They used to beat you with their system and with their structures, and they used to exert a level of pressure on their opposition that the opposition couldn't cope with. Now it feels like Dortmund's system is non-existent for periods during games.
It's really interesting. That it sounds like a Man United problem.
This is the thing. I would actually draw a parallel between today's Dortmund and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's Manchester United in the sense that they can play very, very, very badly for long periods of time, but they have the combinations and a group of individuals who are so good, particularly in concert, that they can seize the momentum from a team. Yeah. They can build on it and take advantage of what happens to a side when they see a lead diminish.
Let's just pause there for a moment for those who are listening who don't watch Dortmund regularly. The reason I looked at that team and thought, wow, that's a mega team, how are they not winning Bundesliga, is because the lineup was Daniel Marlin on the right, we had Marco Reus on the left, Erling Haaland, Julian Brandt, and of course a young English player whose name now is completely escaping my mind.
Jude Bellingham and Mo Dahid in midfield.
I mean it's an incredible team, and I appreciate that they lost Sancho, as you mentioned over the week when we were chatting about it. So they lost Sancho, but he was an attacking talent to replace Marlon with last season. The team of individual names there makes me quiver with excitement.
Yeah, but then there are still some names missing there. Obviously, Axel Witsel made his comeback in this game, but he hasn't been regular this season. He's a big miss. Theo Delaney has left the club. I think I'm right saying Theo Delaney has left the club. and he's a big miss. But also, I think some of the biggest problems are in central defence. They lost Mathieu Moret, the fullback. I know he probably wouldn't play in front of Meunier, but he's absent as a result of that awful injury, which if you didn't see, I'm begging you not to go and look up, because it's just an awful thing to see. But you have this problem at centre-half where you see Mats Hummel's name there and you think, okay, bit of security. Hummels is kind of a declining force. He's got a little bit of pace, which actually various members of the Bayern Munich hierarchy seem to delight in announcing publicly every now and again. They kind of offer this weird running commentary on Mats Hummel's form. And Emre Can is playing as a kind of not emergency centre half, because he's accomplished in the position, and it's not the same as sticking Haaland at centre back. I appreciate it, but he's not an outright centre half. And they're an incomplete side, basically. But the biggest problem is I just don't think that I don't think that kind of the Marco Rose Dortmund combination has quite taken off yet. I'm very, very unconvinced by, as we say, the system. And yet the saving grace. Let me give you a good example. So a couple of weeks before Christmas, they played Greuther Fürth at home. Now Fürth are, I suppose, they're kind of a Norwich of the Bundesliga. They came up and they're a bit overmatched, or they're badly overmatched, and they're kind of in a sort of a cheerful to be here frame of mind. So they're a whipping boy. So you see when you have them at home on the fixture calendar, you think, right, 3 points. So Dortmund played them at the Westfalenstadion before Christmas, and they ended up winning 3-0. But they actually were whistled on their own pitch for long periods of that game. They were just rubbish, absolutely rubbish. And they had a kind of late run of goals, which kind of saved things, and a few nice little moments, a really great Haaland header. And this is kind of characteristic of their season, because they rely too much on these individual moments. And unfortunately, they're kind of able to. Brandt is an outstanding player. I feel like he's really underrated. But obviously, Haaland, Bellingham...
Can I just stop you there as well and say they fit Joe's football hair rule? They fit it perfectly. Best player has one haircut. One other player on the team has the same haircut. And in this instance, it appears to be Haaland and then Julian Brandt. And they both have their same haircut, which is, it's not really the same. They just have the same hair colour and it's long.
I don't think I've ever heard you express that rule before.
Never heard my hair rule?
For like 7 or 8 years,
Yeah, no, I've heard the hair rule before.
We've talked about this extensively on the podcast.
Me when I watched the highlights, that was a thing.
Joe's hair rule never fails. And the hair rule, it doesn't matter what kind of hair it is. By the way, the hair rule is not about saying people should or shouldn't have any kind of hair. Have whatever hair you want, all fine by me. But the hair rule never fails. And the hair rule is that if the best player on the pitch, if there is a best player, they have a particular style of hair. And there will be at least one other player who has exactly the same kind of hair, a sort of supporting
it's
hair.
Southampton, in which case they all got exactly the same.
Yeah, that's the smallest version of it. The biggest version of it, Southampton, a perfect example. Southampton 2015, 2016, everyone looked like they were an RAF fighter pilot from 1943.
Everyone looked like Callum Chambers.
Yeah,
basically.
Exactly. But De Bruyne, Zinchenko, everybody has the thing. It's infallible. Anyway, though, Alex, tell me about Frankfurt a little bit. They were very impressive in the first half. Admittedly, again, I didn't see the second. But Raphael Borre scoring a brace in the first half there. They've also been very impressive recently, not just in this game.
Yeah, and it was a lovely set piece from Kostic. And there's a couple of players here that, like Santos Borre, we talked about in Sensible Transfers before. Like, he had a short spell, I think, at Atletico Madrid that didn't work out. Went back to River Plate, but he's a very I'd say Premier League / Bundesliga style of forward. Like, he's an aggressive presser of the ball. He gets into good positions. He's got a kind of physicality about him which is fun to watch. I think Kostic is an interesting player as well, because he's very much a left wing back rather than a left back. Like, some of his one-on-one defending against Dortmund was not amazingly accomplished. He has this tendency to sort of jump into challenges in a slightly Luke Shaw fashion, where he throws a leg up on the off chance that it might hit the ball that's being crossed in, rather than trying to actually square a man up and defend the space. But he has a very, very good delivery from set pieces and when the ball is moving. And they've stuck to that kind of system, Frankfurt. They've had this system for quite some time now, and it seems really polished. I think it's an interesting point on Dortmund that and Seb, your analogy with United as well, that there are these teams that seem to, like under Klopp and Tuchel, Dortmund were very systems, and then it felt like Favre was kind of a transitional coach who wanted to free up a little bit more of that individuality, and it's almost like teams exist on this spectrum where they're worried almost about being too systems orientated, because then if you lose a couple of players, then sometimes that system can break down. Thinking like, I don't know, Sheffield United, for example, when they lost the two wide centre-backs. So they try and move towards a coach who's a bit more placed in the middle to encourage individuality and so on, but then they can go too far the other way and lose the structure altogether. And it feels like it's a real conundrum for clubs, particularly clubs that have done well off the back of a particular style of play that requires a particular coach and types of players to buy into that and execute it. How do you, like Leeds coming up, when Bielsa leaves Leeds, there's going to be a period of adaptation as they move from a very, very systems orientated team to a team that has to do things a little bit differently. How do you handle that transition? And it feels like, ironically, Dortmund haven't handled a transition well. That's a tactics joke for you there. Thank you.
That was very, very nice. That was excellent. It feels as if I do agree on the Favre point and the kind of slide away from systems football. I always just feel as if without the ball, systems rule. Like I don't really trust free form defending. I don't mind if a team has a group of super smart attacking players who want to kind of ad-lib their way through counterattacks and control phase attacking. The problem for Dortmund, if you look at the type of goals they've conceded this season, and actually Satu was a really good example, because there was it's a great ball from Kostic, yes, but you shouldn't concede that goal because the ball should never get that far. The second goal they concede is ridiculous.
It's really
and it
bad,
was a kind
isn't
of yeah, but it was perfectly descriptive of their situation without the ball. There's no order. There's just a lot of people trying to do things instinctively, and that's where you need the system. I think that's where the system protects you, especially when you've got a lot of absentees. It doesn't solve that problem. I accept that. It offers a level of security that you otherwise probably don't have.
You're preaching to the converted there, but you've got with German football particularly, they, the idea that football exists during the course of the game in four distinct phases that kind of roll into one another. So defense transition to attack transition back to defense. You can't, if you're thinking about football in that way, you can't divorce the two. You can't have here is my tight system for defense, and then once we go into a transition to attack, it's all vibes and we do whatever we like and we all run around and it's kind of fun. But then we've got to get back into a tight defensive structure when that transition occurs. You can't do that. It doesn't make any sense. I think you
can have roles though. I think you can have. I do agree. You can't. I do agree. It's just that if you individualize what we mean here by system, which I know sounds like a contradiction in terms, but if you think about, say, your two centre halves and your deepest midfielder, what is my function on the pitch? That's the kind of that's the first building block, foundation of defending. It feels like that's missing at Dortmund.
Yeah. Oh no,
which
no.
Is, I suppose different saying.
We're not disagreeing here. I think that's the problem, is that when you try to free up your attackers to play in a much more vibesy way, you're automatically reducing your ability to defend systematically, because part of the ability, particularly with counter-pressing teams, part of the ability to then throng around the ball once it's lost is based on a system. Good pressing is entirely systemic.
Yeah.
Otherwise it doesn't work. It just becomes chasing after the ball.
It's also got to be dependent on the security behind the press, which is something that which Klopp really nailed.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, interestingly, that Bellingham has been praised for improving in his game, is rather than just running up to try and squeeze the ball down as a counter-press on his own, he's learned to be more astute about when to stand off, when not to lunge in for a tackle. And that feels like a development that was positive last season and maybe is falling off a little bit this season, but I haven't watched enough of him recently to confirm that.
I wonder a little bit whether Jude Bellingham has acquired a little bit too much responsibility for how that team plays. Obviously, all roads lead to Erling Haaland and probably Marco Reus, but Bellingham is such a good player in so many different ways that it becomes, and I don't think this is a problem specific to Dortmund or even Marco Rose. I think it's just a temptation of a talent as it flourishes, is that you don't try and contain it, and you have a player that's popping up everywhere and doing all sorts of things. And actually, one of my takeaway from this game, especially with Bellingham and Haaland, was just they love getting in the face of opposition players. Love it. And they always do it in English. Bellingham, of course, you'd expect, but it seems that Erling Haaland's housing language is English. He was obviously born in Manchester.
It's the best housing language, Seb. It's the best one.
There was a moment where Dortmund were running down the clock in the corner, and they were just booting the ball against defenders' legs to win more corners and to kill the time. And I think it was Boré actually tried to kind of have a go and have a bit of a chirp at Haaland. And just to show what a kind of talented he is, he actually started snarking him in Spanish. And there's a rather kind of there's a picture of him speaking to him in Spanish, and I'm not sure what the podcast friendly way of saying this is, but gesturing at his own testicles, I think is literally what happened.
The testicle gesture. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. The universal sign of disrespect.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
But Bellingham has this too, and Bellingham is, like, for all his wonderful qualities and his technical abilities, he is a nasty little player too, which I quite like. I quite like about him. He's aggressive and combative, and he's kind of got that self-preservation element to his football, which is, he knows how to look after himself.
There we go. I like it. Well, we're just going to go for another quick break, and when we come back, we'll carry on talking about Bundesliga. Yes, one other game, I should say, we have down here to discuss. RB Leipzig 4-1 Mainz. Now, this is interesting for non-Bundesliga regular viewers. Seb, RB Leipzig in 9th place, 25 points in the Bundesliga at the moment, which is 12 off Dortmund in second, 18 off Bayern in first. It's not the position in the table that I would expect them to be at this point in the season. Explain, please.
Yeah, so things were very, very up and down under Jesse Marsch. So the starting point really is that Leipzig lost an awful lot of talent over the summer, lost those two centre-halves in Mikano and Konate. Everybody knows about that. But also lost Sabitzer, who was very, very important to them just because of, I suppose, his identity of footballer and his technical qualities, but also, much as we've just been speaking about Bellingham, there was a aggression and a personality to Sabitzer, which was very, very important. Lost him. Obviously lost Julian Nagelsmann off to Bayern Munich, and Jesse Marsch comes in. And Jesse Marsch, it's a very difficult conversation, because there were times when I was watching Jesse Marsch's Leipzig when I thought, this is quite a good team. And typically, though, those would be moments where it would be attacking football. And just in my opinion, one of the problems they had was they could press and they could counter, but they were really, really bad at protecting themselves as they went forward. I don't know whether this was a system problem or a result of a new makeshift centre-back combination. Mohamed Simikin has been a regular starter this season. He's a good player, but he's still learning the game a little bit, certainly at this level, because he's new to it. And I think, I don't know, I think Jesse Marsch got this job at the wrong time. One of the interesting things about this discussion is that we just finished talking about Eintracht Frankfurt, and they are now coached by Oliver Glasner, former Wolfsburg head coach. And Glasner was one of the people who was at least in the conversation to become Leipzig's head coach. Didn't get the job, went to Marsch, and I think there were better times for Jesse Marsch to get that job, easier times when you weren't replacing so many pieces. And Leipzig, for a lot of the season, looked like a team in transition. They had holes and gaps in their football, lacked some of the synonyms which have developed during the Red Bull era. And this was really encouraging for all the opposite reasons. They were very, very. If you hadn't watched a Leipzig game since Nagelsmann left, and you just turned on your TV to watch this, you'd think nothing had changed. Nobody left, nobody's, and it was very, very...
Well, worth pointing out, for the sake of context, that Mainz were one place above them in the league table. So a 4-1 victory, this pragmatic, probably suggestive that Leipzig are lower than they should be.
Well, yes, they are, but also, so the moment which changed this game was Mainz had a man sent off for Alexander Hack for a deliberate handball on his line. But I understand that places the match and the result in a context, but it came from a really nice press from Andre Silva, Leipzig getting bodies forward quickly and vertically to support the press and to support the break. And Hack was left with no choice but to, I don't think it was deliberate, but it clearly prevented a goal, so it was rightfully a red card. But then what Leipzig did from that point on was real quality. So there was some real progress shown. Like all 4 goals were counter-attacking, really. The penalty was a result of one. But if you see, I think the speed of, first of all, the ball recovery, and then how quickly the ball moves forward as a result of that. And then the third part of that is when you look at the point at which the goal is scored, how many attacking players are actually in support of that? For the second goal, I think Leipzig got players forward to construct a 5-on-4. And that was scored by Dominik Szoboszlai. For the fourth goal, scored by Andre Silva, it was a 5-on-3. And you're seeing players work really, 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 really hard. And this is kind of a Jurgen Kloppism. Like you're trying to outrun players. And it's obviously a Ranickism as well. And Leipzig have it. And there are imperfections and there are problems with defence. And they've got Bayern in a couple of weeks and Sociedad in February too. And so they aren't back. It's just you can see the Bayern under Domenico Tedesco. And you can see before Christmas, they had 3 games under him where they just looked confused. They looked like a group of players who had to take too much instruction and were just overwhelmed. This was the first time I've watched them where I thought, okay, this is the beginning of a new direction, and it is convincing. So it was really good. Mainz are a good side, by the way. They just never really recovered from losing Hack in the first half, and they weren't willing to make any compromise. They still pressed, they were still aggressive, and it kind of cost them. They sort of went down swinging, so to speak. But and I do recommend anybody gets a chance watches Bo Svensson's Mainz, because they're a fun watch.
Okay.
But this was about Leipzig, and they were good, very, very good.
Alex, we've heard Leipzig, had a bit of a talent drain over the summer already. There are other players that lots of international teams will be interested in, or teams internationally, I should say, would be interested in.
Oh yes. There's obviously Nkunku, who came on the touch where he gathers the ball and then sort of cuts it back inside for Szoboszlai to score, was delightful. And he just offers, he's just a really great player. Like there's not many, I don't tend to get excited by attacking players. It's not really in my nature to find that kind of thing fun. But he is just,
Class.
He's just brilliant. Everything he does is good, and he puts an incredible amount of effort and energy into, like Seb was saying, getting up and supporting those attacks. He has the technical capability to execute what he's doing at high speed, and that's high speed in terms of how he's running and how the players around him are running, but also in terms of processing the position of opposition players really quickly. He just, like, there's just nothing that he seems to do that isn't very good. Yes. There's also Tyler Adams there, who I think is a really interesting player. He's quite a versatile, he's sort of like a central midfielder by default, but he can play deeper. He can also play as a right back. And that kind of high energy pressing style of play, but also this ability to carry it forwards a little bit. He gives Leipzig that kind of platform, I think, to be able to get those players forward. Like Seb says, if you're committing a lot of players forwards in attack or to counter press, you need to have a structure behind it. I did get annoyed with the way that Simakan continued to appeal for the offside for the Mainz goal, rather than drop his hand and close down the player who ultimately got the ball. But that's just a minor grouch.
Simakan's going to be a good player. He's a little rash at times, but on Adams.
No, we talked about him as a sensible transfer thing when he was at Strasbourg, and Strasbourg are one of those clubs that produces not just the occasional, but like some genuinely good players. Like Ludovic Ajorca's there, Anthony Catchy is moving somewhere to Germany, I think. I can't remember exactly, but he was one of the young prospects that was coming off that Strasbourg line and was really interesting. So he will be good.
So the Adams thing is quite intriguing, because on Saturday, one of the problems posed by Mainz is that even with 10 men, they weren't willing to deviate from Bo Svensson's ideas of how to play the game, which is very straightforward, very, very vertical, and very quick. And Adams had a few really good moments in the construction of goals, because he created the second kind of inadvertently. He was a little bit fortunate with a long ball, but he also created I think I think he was responsible for beginning the move, which ended in the Nkunku goal, the third Leipzig goal. And there was a moment probably about 35 minutes in where Mainz was still absolutely dead set on going forward, and Leipzig had been caught probably with about 5 players pressing, and there was a ball kind of played vertically up the quite close to the right-hand touchline, and Adams was in there anticipating it and making the interception. And that's what we mean about having that lock at the back, in that you need to have a player there who can see a few plays ahead. You know, you've got to understand what's going to happen, and even when your team is pressing and recovering and trying to launch their own little counter press, you need to have someone that is this is going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but who is aware of the counter press, the counter press of the counter press. I'm not even sure the right way to express that, but Adams did that really well. That's the point I'm trying to make. And I don't know what his future is. I don't know how good he's going to be, but he was very, very good here, and he seemed to really thrive in a quite a simple role, but one that he was good at, because he reads the game well. He plays passes forward, and at this stage of Tedesco's time at Leipzig, that's really good. I mean, that's all you want at this moment. It's going to develop further. I accept that, but he did a good job. And he's had quite a difficult season, Tyler Adams. And he's had a few really bad moments, but this was very, very positive.
Lovely. Okay. Before we do a couple of little UK-related transfers, Roma 3 for Juventus, or in other words, Seb's monthly opportunity to make fun of Mourinho, I would assume this is. Unless, of course, Alex, you pop this in the plan, and I'm surprising myself.
No.
Yep.
No, I
Seb,
didn't.
Go ahead and moan.
It was extraordinary. Roma played very, very well, actually. Roma had an excellent hour. Scored 3 nice goals, but one in particular from Lorenzo Pellegrini. It was just a beautiful free kick from 25 yards. Up, down, over the wall, top corner. Fabulous. And then I don't know what. Like you would... The assumption would be, looking at the scoreline, Juventus end up winning 4-3. You'd think, oh, well, Mourinho just...
You said Roma were up 3-1 at one point.
Yeah, they were.
Wow.
And they were worth it. They were excellent. They played really, really well. And they obviously lost to Milan, and that was a bad result, and this was the perfect response to it.
Yeah.
And then the bottom fell out of it, and you'd expect it to be a kind of, oh well, with a 3-1 lead, Mourinho is just gonna drop everybody behind the ball and start and they're gonna have like 36% possession, that kind of thing, and then just invite waves of pressure. It wasn't like that at all. Roma actually had pretty decent control of the ball. It's just that every time Juventus came forward, they looked incredibly vulnerable. It looked like one of those where the wounds of what happened in the Europa League haven't quite healed, and Juventus didn't play particularly well, I didn't think, but somehow ended up winning 4-3. Roma also missed a penalty to make it 4-4, which it was a penalty, definite handball against De Ligt, who is that's another discussion point, what's happened to him. But it's I think that leaves Roma 6 points off the Champions League places.
Actually, 9 currently. 32 points in 7th place. In 4th is Atalanta with 41 points, and actually one game fewer played. So it's potentially more than 9. The Mourinho project at the moment not looking so hot. I mean, that's damaging for their Champions League hopes, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think it's it's a disaster. It's just there's no consistency to it, and I think. We'll happily jump all over Jose Mourinho as and when, but I don't think that point is quite now. I just think there's something in this Roma team that needs curing at the moment, and it's I don't know what it is. It seems psychological as much as anything. But
let me put it this way: they're conceding more goals than the teams above them, and they're scoring fewer.
There's a very succinct analysis. Yes,
thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you.
That's
how that tends to go.
On the other hand, vital win, maybe not vital, but very important win for Juventus, who are also outside of the top 4. Serie A top 4 at the moment: Inter, AC, Napoli, Atalanta. Incidentally, this week, I believe on Thursday, we're releasing on Tifo IRL a very fun video in which JJ sits down with James Horncastle, the Athletic Serie A specialist, and we go through the table. I believe the video is entitled something like, "So you've missed half of Serie A. This is what you need to know," with James Horncastle and JJ, but it's a shorter title than that. Anyway, the point is that's good fun. Juventus in 5th place, 21 games played, 38 points. Atalanta could open a 5-point gap if they win their 6-point gap if they win the next game. fascinating.
Hey,
stuff.
don't rule out Fiorentina. So we're recording. I think they're playing at 5:00 on Monday. CET, so we're obviously recording before then, but they're playing very, very well, and they're not just the goals of Dusan Vlahovic.
They also have 2 games in hand on most of the teams above them.
Yeah, so they're playing pretty well. They've also signed Jonathan Nkone, which is really interesting. He was a player that I know Alex likes as well. I can't wait to see him play for Fiorentina. Someone we won't be seeing playing for Juventus anytime soon is Federico Chiesa. He has done his ACL, which is awful news. I love watching Chiesa. I think it's great, but that is very, very damaging for a Juventus team who really aren't playing all that well anyway.
So that's this season, right?
That
if
is
not some of
probably
next
at least
season.
this season. A little bit of next season too. So we'll see him probably a year. I don't know. I don't know how long these things take anymore. Yeah.
And for such a explosive player who relies on that ability to generate bursts of pace, that's...
You worry about them coming back, is that what you mean?
Devastating, yes.
Yeah. That is what I mean. Yes.
That's what you mean. Well, best wishes to Federico Chiesa. All of the best from Tifo. Do recover well, good sir. A couple more things I wanted to talk about before we finish now, rounding up. Coutinho appears to have signed or is signing for Aston Villa. Also, Luca Digne. These two, the Coutinho one a little bit less surprising, just because there's obviously the Gerrard connection now, and Coutinho was definitely going to go somewhere. I'm sure Barcelona are absolutely delighted that he's going to go somewhere. I haven't looked at the specifics of the deal, if indeed it's occurred yet. I have no idea, but it's certainly heavily mooted.
It's a 6 months loan. It's been completed, and Coutinho has taken a pay cut to complete it.
Right, and do we know what proportion of the wages that Aston Villa are paying?
I don't. No.
I'd be curious to know that. But very interested, Alex, to see what you think about that. I mean, does Coutinho still have it? I mean, I would have thought one of the issues is that he hasn't played enough in the last couple of years for us to really get to grips with his ability now.
Well, I mean, it kind of almost feels like that's been the case since that, 2013-14 season when he was quite good.
Yeah.
Has he actually put consistent minutes together anywhere?
He's had half seasons, I think.
Yeah, well, that's not consistent minutes. It's, I guess the issue with him is that he wants to be the guy at whichever club that he's playing at. He wants things to go through him. He considers himself. There was that classic thing with Klopp where he considered himself to be a 10, and Klopp was like, "You're not really that. You know, you're actually very good at these other things." And he was like, "No, I'm a 10." So I guess it'll be interesting to see the dynamic where a manager is managing a player that he has played with is always interesting. A manager managing a player that he's played with who has that view of himself will be even more so. I think it'll be a real test of Gerrard's ability to man manage. And I also think it's the kind of thing where, when Villa had Grealish in that sort of creative inside left role where a lot of play went through him and he was the conduit for most of what they did well with the help of John McGinn, that actually seemed to work quite well for Villa. It could be that Coutinho is going to be able to do that. But like you say, there has to be a caveat around how much he's played. So
bit of a tough one for Emi Buendia as well, Seb, who's only really just joined in the summer. It's not impossible to see how they could play together, but it's a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, it is tricky. But then if you look at sort of Villa's performance and you see the lack of shots, the lack of progressive passes into the penalty box, and you see what Philippe Coutinho is still really good at, I suppose it's pretty easy to spin him as an answer to things that Villa can't quite do. So I understand.
Buendia's best seasons were off the right anyway for Norwich.
Yeah, well then
I think that just happened to be because of that was the formation that they were playing in the Championship, and as part of that system, that's where he best fit. I think, not to say that those aren't his best numbers when he's been in those positions, but I definitely see him more as a 10. I think he just hasn't had a season where he's had the opportunity to show that necessarily. But he has all the qualities.
But it's a difficult one, isn't it, though? Because if Coutinho has a good 6 months, then there's going to be a lot of pressure on Villa to make this a permanent deal in the summer. They're not going to face a lot of resistance from Barcelona in doing that, I wouldn't have thought. And then I suppose a
hefty bit of encouragement, perhaps.
Well, then once you sign a player like that, then you're kind of, you go down this path of having to basically construct your attacking midfield around them. So that would be very, very bad news for Emi Buendia. Also, Leon Bailey who can't stay fit, which is a real shame because I love watching Leon Bailey. But he, you'd imagine that, he's always going to play right or left. He's not going to play centrally. So you're kind of left with Buendia playing from the left. Potentially, which is it's difficult, but I get why Villa have done it. It's not. I know people have said, "Oh, it's just Gerrard bringing a mate in," but that's not true at all. There's a very sound footballing logic behind it.
Well, predictions then. These sorts of loans can go one way or another. I'd like to hear you both a thumb up or a thumb down, please. No middle ground.
It's a thumb up from me.
Okay.
It's a thumb up. I think he'll have an excellent 6 weeks and then fade.
Okay, well, you've basically done a middle, and I just
45 degrees.
Yeah, I just ruled that out, Seb. Pretty sure I just
middle
ruled that
ground
out.
to you. Yeah,
No,
middle
you can't do
grounded.
that. Not allowed. You said you think it's a thumb up. You think it's.
I'll thumb up them. Thumb up.
Fine. Mine is a middle thumb. I think I haven't decided. What? Luke Coutinho is the other one. Apparently, all the rumours and reports at the moment are linking him and saying that he's agreed personal terms with Aston Villa. Aston Villa going to beat other clubs such as Chelsea to the signature, although, again, these things are... who could say whether these things are true or not? It's a slightly odd one, isn't it? Or is it?
It's... Well, yeah, it's odd to me because I think Luke Coutinho's really good.
So do I.
But I also think that...
I can understand leaving Everton, but I can't understand
terrific news for Matt Targett, is it, really?
Well, that's the other thing. Like, Targett has been sort of underratedly good in an annoying way since he left Southampton. And, I think Villa generate quite a lot coming through their fullbacks, Cash on the right and Targett on the left. And so from a systems point of view, it makes sense because Digne is an upgrade on Targett. But then I don't know why Digne wouldn't be going somewhere better than Aston Villa, with all due respect to Aston Villa.
No, indeed.
I think Villa are affluent enough to offer great wages. I think the Villa project is quite exciting. I don't imagine it would be that difficult to convince someone who's been disenfranchised from Rafa Benitez Everton to join Villa. And also, like the Chelsea thing, Chelsea want a temporary solution. They're trying to recall Emerson from Lyon and to fill in for Ben Chilwell.
I guess the point is, though, if it goes through, regardless of the context and the scenario, Villa have got themselves a fantastic player.
Definitely.
Oh, for sure.
It's a sort of deal that I feel like outside of the context that you've just provided, Seb, would not happen, and therefore is a steal.
He's a really good player.
Yeah,
good set piece taker as well.
Good set piece taker. He's the sort of player who when you think about, probably because he's been playing in such a shonky Everton side for a while, when you think about the best left backs in the Premier League, you don't automatically think of him, but he's absolutely up there.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, there we go. That's the end of the Tifo Football Podcast for this week. Seb Stafford Bloor, Danke schön auf Wiedersehen.
Vielen Dank, Herr Devine. Tschüss.
Yes. And Alex Stewart, bye.
Yeah, that'll do. Bye.
Fine. Yeah. We'll be back next week with more AFCON and whatever else is happening at that time. Exciting stuff. Keep an eye out on Tifo IRL this week for some fun video releases and on the Illustrated channel. And thanks to you for listening. Hope everyone's new year is just going just fine. Goodbye.